I do want to be an example to other women. I want them to understand that you can age gracefully. The angst that women go through now and what they think they need to do to themselves to fit in, it pains me when I look at them and I'm like, God, you're beautiful. Like, you know what I mean? Like if I would have, like my 20-year-old, my 30-year-old, my 40-year-old, when I look back at her now, I'm like, man, you look good. Like what the hell was I so upset about? Like I look at these women, they don't see themselves. We don't see ourselves for who we are. We do not see ourselves.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition, a podcast about making the most of the changes we're given. As a married father of 3 teenagers, a longtime global business executive and adventurer, I've been through hundreds of transitions in my life. Many have been difficult, but all have led to a depth and richness I could never have imagined. You'll get to hear all about them on this podcast so that together we can create more love and joy in our lives, no matter what transitions we are going through. Welcome back to the next episode of Life in Transition podcast. I'm super excited, and as I told her a minute ago, a little bit nervous to have my dear friend, Anisa Kaker, I'll say that correctly, who's an amazing woman and a friend of mine since we were teenagers and has really we've shared each other's growth journey through life. And she's also founded Anisa International and led it into one of the world's leading beauty tool companies. So I'm really excited to have you here, Anisa, and reconnect in this way. And welcome to Life in Transition podcast.
Thank you. When you say that we've known each other since teenagers is pretty funny.
Yeah, it's wild. I think you were
wild.
18 and I was 17, something like that when we first met.
Yeah. Well, was I 19 and you were 16? Like, is
maybe
that
something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long journey. What a long, strange trip it's been, you know.
Yeah.
And pretty amazing, you know. I'll start the way I always do, Anisa, which is what do you feel like has been one of the most meaningful or impactful, significant transitions that you've had in your life?
So when you and I talked last, what really came up for me was that when I turned 40, and there's been very significant things before that, but there was something about the maturity of 40 that changed my life, I think, for the better, and where I became more self-aware, and that had, what was significant is I got divorced, and I had been with someone for a very long time, had made a choice when maybe I was not as conscious, or at the time it made sense. And at the time it was, what it was. But when I turned 40, it was very dramatic how it ended, and it was very painful. And it created, it wasn't so much about the other person. What I found was, okay, what was my relationship to myself? And then I think that's when I became aware that I'm supposed to have a relationship with myself first. And how was I treating myself, which was not great. Mm-hmm. And that was really painful. That was about a year and a half of understanding how I had been treating myself.
Can I pull out 2 things from that? The first was that you said, and I want to highlight this because I think it's really important. You said, it was what it was, and I did the best that I could, right, when I chose that partner. And I think that's a really important realization for you and for everybody to recognize, to quit carrying blame or shame about stuff that happened in the past. You did the best that you could. We all do the best that we can at that time. And then the second that I really love what you said was, I realized I had to treat myself. I had to start with treating myself right? That I realized I wasn't treating myself right. And I feel like that's something that's hard for a lot of people. I'll say, especially women that are caregivers in general, a little bit more naturally than men, but to realize that you have to start with yourself, right? And that's such a big realization, and one that I think a lot of people still don't have. They still feel it's selfish to take care of themselves first. But the fact is, you can't give what you don't have. So what a good realization to come to, and a little bit better than me. I think when you did get it when you were 40, I think it took me till 48 to figure that out. So what a good realization, though. And then what did that lead to? So you realized you quit sort of blaming whatever happened in the past, whatever happened, happened. But now you need to start taking care of yourself first and loving yourself in the right way first. And how did that materialize? What did that look like at 40?
So I felt like I was, going through a death, and I was, a part of my self had to physically. It felt like I was dying. It really
Mm,
did feel like that
mm,
because so many things I believed to be true, or so many things that I had built a life on, or who I thought I was, or and also ways that I had let myself down, and the things I had been telling myself. I mean, that part of me had to die. And so it was like they call that, right, the dark night of the soul when it comes to spiritual awakening. So I really feel like I went through this spiritual awakening where I was reading, when things fall apart, when it gets really bad, because it did feel like this whole life I built, this dream I built, these thoughts I had were gone. And the awareness of what really existed, it's like something like somebody just turned a light on, and that just showed me all the darkness that I had been in. So that was tough. It was also really exciting because when something is gone, right, there's new opportunity. And I got to choose how to fill the emptiness because it was very
mm,
empty.
mm,
That's when I decided to be better instead of bitter was my goal.
mm,
You know,
mm. Oh, I love that. I want to
yeah,
steal that one from you,
yeah,
Anisa, to be better instead of bitter when
yeah.
something
And then
bad happens.
And I think 40 for a woman actually can be one of the most exciting times. Like, I think at 40, I was at my best. I started working out more. I started kickboxing. I started cooking. I started traveling. I started engaging, differently. I started just like living my life, like smelling the roses. And even though I didn't date or anything really for about a year and a half, I was totally on my own. I just enjoyed my life. And still cried every day a lot. I felt like I was having a physical detox,
Mm.
but it was
Anisa, can I ask you, how did you give yourself permission? Because it's a choice that you made, right? So a lot of people, I've noticed that, they'll say, hey, I chose this, then why am I so sad? Why is it so hard? Why does it feel like a part of me is dying? How did you give yourself permission to feel those feelings, to do the cry every day? Like, because that's really actually very advanced in a way, very wise to let yourself feel that. And how did you give yourself permission to do that?
well, I think the alternative was I would get really sick. I mean, I would have been sick because it was literally, I feel like emotions get stored in our body. Uh, I did not want to hang on. I'd been hanging on already, right? Like, I'd already had resentment. I'd already had so many things. I didn't want to perpetuate the same because I think whatever we believe is that whatever the external is, right, it's in our internal. So if I was being treated badly, or if I was, whatever was going on, like, it was in me, so I was creating this life and I didn't want to keep recreating it. I think my greatest fear was that I was in a pattern I could not break. So that is what I fought so hard for.
See,
Bless
I
you.
sneezed. It's okay. Thank you. Oh no, but it's
I mean,
really again, it's I think to recognize that before you physically get sick, and to realize that you need to let the sadness, you need to let the resentment, you need to let the anger pass through you instead of trying to resist it, instead of trying to deny it, to let it move through you is, I mean, I think that's a testament to, to the work that you have done up to that point
I
to be
mean,
able to
seriously,
see that.
kickboxing, like, saved me. Like, I just was physical expression, getting that all out, which I still believe in now, and I just did some work recently that I believe in that. Like, I would walk every day, probably almost 2 hours. I would be
Wow.
pounding it out. I would go to
Right.
kickboxing. I would be pounding it out. Like,
Right.
it
Right.
it was so stuck in me,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I didn't want it anymore, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful because on the other side of all that, I knew there was freedom. It was just gonna take time.
So if somebody is in that situation where they've just even if it's a choice they made, if they've just gone through a divorce or lost somebody or, failed at a business and they have this stuff in them and they don't know what it is. You said it was really important to physically move it out. How would you recommend them to get started? What was the trigger that, like, how did you know to go pound the pavement, to go pound the kickboxing bag? Like, what did you follow? What sense did you have that allowed you to move in that direction?
Yeah, I don't know because I didn't wanna go crazy. I felt like I could have gone insane, right? So it literally was like I am going mad with the pain. So the first thing was just walking, like literally just walking, and that I started to feel better, and I literally would talk to myself when I was walking. I probably
Sure.
was like a crazy person, saying all the things I wanted to say that could never say, and it doesn't matter if I say it to that person or not. It doesn't matter, like, but I needed to get it out of me, right? So
Right.
and
Right.
then I think what, for anybody, I mean, even just the work I've done, I don't think sometimes we feel like it's okay to, like, if we were to get a bat and pound something, if it's okay to scream in the car, if it's okay to hit a pillow. I don't think, and what I think I told myself was that if I started it, I wouldn't be able to stop it. I felt like it was gonna be an endless stream, that the rage and the sadness would never stop. That's one reason why I always held it back. Um, and then another thing was like, "This is inappropriate. What if somebody's watching me?"
Right.
Like,
Right.
I felt ashamed that I needed to do it, so there was shame also attached to expression for some reason for me because that's what happened to me in childhood. Like, I'll give you something to cry about, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
So, it was never okay just to show emotion, and so that I had so much stuff about that.
Yeah. So how did you I'm gonna come back to this question again, but how did you give yourself permission to do that then? Because you had all these reasons, you had all this, I'm gonna call it programming, telling you that it's not okay, and yet somehow you gave yourself permission anyway. How did you give yourself permission?
I don't know. I don't know how it happened. I think I prayed, to tell you the truth. I was praying for healing. I was praying, I was reading great stuff that I understood that I wasn't alone
Mm,
in my
mm,
feelings, that this is
mm,
not unique to me.
mm,
So
I
I
think that's a huge, a very common doorway to start to permission, right? When you realize you're not alone in something, right? That it's and that maybe you won't fall apart, you won't continue forever. I had that fear too. If I tap into my anger, if I tap into this, it's going to hurt somebody, not just me, but somebody else, right? It's not going to stop. And I was really
yeah,
afraid to even come close to that. But I realized afterward, if I don't acknowledge that part of me, that's a real part of me. And if I don't acknowledge it, I can't be a whole human being on the other side, right? I'm really limiting myself.
and, like, I wasn't that advanced. I gotta tell you, it was survival. It was pure animalistic instinct that if I don't do this, it's not gonna be good. Like,
Right.
I just
Mine's
it
actually
was
going to break down. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, "I will go," like, I couldn't handle the pain. It was too overwhelming, and I had to distract myself, and so I would find healthy ways to do that, you know?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think it's interesting. I mean, reflecting on my own story, I gave myself permission to feel some of those feelings and the anger and stuff earlier, but I didn't separate, like I didn't give myself permission to let go of the business stuff or this, the stress of until it actually made me sick. Right. So on one hand, I handled some of it, but then the other, I couldn't see the forest for the trees until my body stopped.
Yeah.
And that, of course, then you have time to contemplate in things because you can't do anything else.
Well, it's just about, I was reading scientific stuffs too about the brain. I was really trying to educate myself about, because I am intellectual in a lot of ways. Like, why would I do this to myself? Why would this happen? Why would I stay in a situation that I knew that was unhealthy, that I had wanted to exit for so long? Why what was going on, that I would allow this? And again, the other thing that was motivating me, because I'm a very result-oriented person, is that I didn't wanna do it again, right?
Okay. Right.
So I do believe we can learn from our mistakes. I do believe we can change our brain chemistry and patterns. I believe in that I am not a victim. I I do not come from that point of view. I create what is around me. So how do I recreate, I wanted to recreate where I would, if I was in a relationship again or ever married again, this would not, it would be very different, right?
Right.
And my
Right.
fear was, I'm gonna do it again. Like, so I was like, "I better hustle, man," like, because I did wanna be with someone, however, I wanted it to be something much more loving, equal, all that.
So the you used the fear
I
of
did.
recreating that mistake to motivate you to do something different. But instead of going away from the fear, you sort of went toward the fear. Like, okay, this really scares me, but to not be healed and think about having it again, I want to
Yes,
solve it now instead of avoid
yes,
it.
yes,
Yeah.
I wanna make sure that that's not an option.
No, that's really powerful. That's really powerful.
Yeah, it's kinda
It's
sucks, but most of my life, I have to be motivated by adversity, so what I'm working on now is that's not what has to motivate me.
Hey, yeah, that's great. That's
Yeah,
great. It's not bad to be motivated by adversity, but it is also, wonderful to be motivated by joy or gratitude or connection,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
And that's a great, yeah, that's, and I've also seen recently, Anisa, that also the going toward the fear of, um, there's fear of like stepping out, but there's also like fear of disappointing others or fear of, and it's okay to go toward those fears as well, to practice that. Like, what does it mean if I'm more authentic to myself, even if it disappoints somebody else, right? And letting go of things that you fear to let go of is just as important as going toward things that you fear as far as like accomplishing something.
Yeah, I think the whole thing about people pleasing, right? That's been my MO because it was kinda what I was taught as a child that others' needs are more important than mine. So, at 50 something, I'm starting to let go of the guilt that, and it's guilt. I feel when I put myself first, this pattern of guilt comes up, and I was taught that as a young age. That's not natural. So, I am doing my best to relearn that and to unlearn because that's not healthy.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I realized that like, it's in episode 7 of this podcast, but like I realized that I have been people pleasing. Like I learned to please the man very young to survive. I mean, you know a little bit about my story, right? When I was 5 or 6 years old, I'm like, ooh, shut up and please the man. And that served me very well in corporate America. And corporate, well, it's not America because I worked all over the world, but in corporate, because if you please your boss, you answer the question before they ask, you're going up the ladder fast. And I did. And it looked perfect on the outside, but completely from the wrong place.
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't realize that. I think I had that realization when I was 49 years old. Like, man, this has been my primary driver. And very visceral, very survival. So yeah, it is super important to take care of ourselves, right? And I had last week, and I wrote about this in Friday Reflections on Friday, but had a pretty rough week last week. And my coach asked me on Thursday, who are you showing up as? Who are you being in these
Mm.
different areas of my life? And it was interesting. It wasn't the same person in each of these different areas, but he kept bringing me back to how you show up, what your beingness is much more important than anything that you do or anything that you say.
Yep.
And that's something I can choose. Like you said, that I don't have to be a victim to that. Like I can look at it differently.
Yeah.
But it starts with taking care of myself. It starts with rest and gratitude and meditation and journaling and doing the few important things in my professional life that really matter and not being sucked up in the rest of it.
Yeah.
Right. But
I
it's
mean,
hard
it's
to
not
remember.
yeah, well, it's not easy to have self-awareness, and I think to me, I'm starting to I like the word pattern. So, pattern's very logical, pragmatic, it's not heavy. Like, what is my pattern that serves and has served me for survival? I don't wanna discount these survival patterns, they got me to where I am today.
Absolutely. Yep.
But do they serve me now, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I can bring them up when I need them, but I wanna have the choice and not just be on autopilot,
That's
right?
right. Yep. And I do that. It's part of my check-in every morning. I call it parts, you call it patterns, but this part of me that served me really well, that was took great care of me from 5 until 40. But it's interesting with that. A lot of those patterns are parts. And when I have the conversation with them, I'll say, "How old are you?"
Mm.
And they'll be 5 or 10 or 11. And then here's a really interesting question. I'll say, how old do you think I am? And no more than likely, they think I'm very close to their age, 6 or 12. And when they get it that I'm 52 and that, that life is safe now, then they can be very relieved to go do something else and not have to be in fear
Yeah,
or in control.
before COVID or during, like, COVID, I started seeing a new, therapist, and she was doing brain spotting with me, and so we started
Mhm.
doing some of that work. Like, I was taking my teenager to work. She was
Right.
running my business, right? So I was she's pretty, like, that was not cool, so we really did a lot of work on that. I was like, "Yeah, I don't need you to run my business. I got this. I'm gonna let you stay home and play," or, uh,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. She didn't get to do
And to me, like when I first stumbled onto that, I would sort of resist that part and try to push back against it. And what I realized, um, working with the therapist, was that it's more to see that part and to acknowledge that part and to thank that part. And I had this one really profound experience where there was a part of me that I hadn't chose to see before that I called like the unacceptable one or even the sewer boy, but
Mm,
it was me that was making him unacceptable, not somebody else. And it was this guy, like, think of like Dobby
mm,
from Harry Potter, like,
mm,
very diminutive, wearing a rag, completely dirty.
mm,
And once I made him acceptable to me, once I acknowledged him, once I got down on his level and looked him in the eye and said, I see you, which to me is even more powerful than I love you, but
mm.
I really see you, he transformed right there, like into this, like, now he calls himself Wild Man, like this Tarzan guy. It's like 28 years old, living in the wild, completely different energy, completely different, and doesn't pull on me like that anymore. Right. But it took me acknowledging them as they were, for that part of me to transform. So it's really, yeah, it's interesting. I think, I used to think that's credit. It's so woo, like I want to talk about it to anybody until I started reading Richard Schwartz's work. For 40 years. That's exactly what he's been doing. This internal family systems, he calls it.
Mm.
So yeah, that's really good stuff. Man, we could talk forever, but I want to come back on this transition. Like, if you, like, what did you learn? If you hadn't made that transition, where would your life be today, Anisa? Like, if you hadn't taken that step, taken that hard choice to say, hey, it's time to get divorced. It's time to take care of myself.
I mean, I really think I don't even know if I'd be here.
Mm,
I mean, it was
mm,
that bad. I feel sick to think about it whenever I think
mm,
about what coulda happened, which a bit of a miracle happened for me to get out of it. Like, it was something phenomenal happened that was otherworldly, uh, and I feel like it was divinely led for me to, get out of that situation, and so, yeah, so when I look back, I know it sounds dramatic, and I can be a bit dramatic, I am whatever but I literally feel like I'm nauseous to think if I was still in that because I don't think I
wow.
would have survived it much longer.
Right. Right.
Yeah, because negativity, misery, the trauma, um, I was really sick. I was sick inside, and in the minute in 30 days, I lost 30 pounds. I was carrying that weight
Right. Like
of
holding everything in. Yeah.
yeah, I was literally so toxic. Um, so, yeah, so, like, I can't even imagine that my life would have ever taken that path still,
Mm,
you
mm.
know?
And that's maybe when I talked about earlier about the permission. I mean, if it's that strong, then it is almost a life or death situation. So you have to do something differently, or else you're not going to make it. And unfortunately, that's where most of us get to before we do the difficult decision.
And
Um,
what I was doing to other people because of my own toxicity, right? It bleeds out.
oh,
Um,
absolutely.
like, I
Yeah.
don't know if I would have my business. I don't know, like, if people could have tolerated, the unhappiness I was living with, right?
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
yeah, it would have impacted so many people also negatively.
Yeah, for sure. If you could go back now, some roughly 15 years ago to that time, what would you change? What would you do differently? What would you tell your 40-year-old self now from the growth and the wisdom and perspective you have now 15 years later, roughly 15 years later?
I mean, I think I think what we all kind of would do in some aspect is like, hey, you're going to be okay. Like this is meant. You're gonna come through this, and I like even go for it more. Like just dive right into it. Don't be angry about the other person. It is their path, their thing. It wasn't about them. It's always been about you. And, release, 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 allow, 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 forgive, forgive, forgive. And then I would have even, I think, dove in sooner to the family origin stuff instead of just been like the relationship stuff. I think it would have been great if I could have handled it, to dive into all the preceding stuff that led up to that.
So if you would go back and tell your younger self, it's basically like go full speed into it. Like don't resist the cold, dark water. Like jump in, get your therapist, get your healing, get your reading, get your Hoffman process, whatever it is, and go full bore, and not just about
Yeah.
whatever the issue that's bringing it to a head, but going all the way back and healing yourself, like making it
Yes.
a top priority to use this demarcation point, this opening to heal yourself.
Yes, and, like, you're not the problem. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. Like, I felt like, like you were talking about this Dobby, like, I felt like, that's who I was. And, like, if I could just tell her, "Hey, you are perfect, man. This is what it is. Everything needed to happen the way it needed to happen. The rest of your life in front of you is gonna be some of the most beautiful, contented, loving, like, you have so much in you. This is just needed to happen, and, like, now let it go, So, yeah, I think I would have gone in, like, 100 times more. Like, I would have been like, "Let's do it," you know?
So what has, since you've made that choice, and that would be great advice, and for somebody that's starting into that, to just not be afraid of it, to jump in completely. But what's your life been like? I mean, since then, like what have you experienced? What you mentioned that maybe, for a woman, you feel the 40s is the best time of your life. I feel, and maybe it's just what I woke up. I feel it's 50s because that's what I woke up, right? But what has your life been like? Tell us a little bit about how you are experiencing life differently, how you are showing up, how are you being, and what is it like? How does it feel?
Yeah, I think, 40s, they weren't perfect. I still had a lot I needed to deal with, a lot of the mess I dealt with, like, created, and, it's when I had to like, it's something about maturity. It was maturation. I think I'd been stunting my growth. So in my 40s, I started to just find out, like, wow, I'm an individual. Like, I have my boundaries. I can advocate for myself. I can evolve myself. I, have a lot to offer. It's like, that's what the 40s brought me. The 50s, have been a little more interesting. As a woman, I know, I mean, menopause is real.
Mm-hmm.
It hit me very hard. Um, it is life-changing, mind, body, spirit. I don't understand God's plan for women biologically. Like,
Right. Right.
why is this important? And I do get it on some level, but nobody really talks about it. Nobody really guides us. Um, and it was tough. It tough what it did to me physically, the energy, the aging. I aged really fast, faster than I thought I ever would, and then, the self-care that's needed, anxiety that started to happen that I'd never experienced before, having allergic reactions to things, being more sensitive to things, feeling my age, like never something I felt before. And also what's cool about it, the other side is a grounding, a maturation, a strength, resilience to evolve further, to understand the impact I have on the world around me. So that has been now the 50s. I'm going to be 58 this year. And I feel like I'm finally kind of through the really difficult part,
Mm.
you know?
Mm.
Um, it was what it was. It's not for the aging is not for the weary, right? Aging's not for the weak. It's hard to age. And especially in the industry I'm in, around the people, like, and I don't wanna be something I'm not. So I've made choices to allow myself to age,
Mhm.
you know,
Which
but
I
yet,
think is really both brave and beautiful, Anisa,
yeah,
myself.
I am starting to, I feel the same. Like, I'm starting to feel the same, that I actually am so grateful. I'm still here. I have the strength I have, the wisdom I have, the health I have. I'm really lucky. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I could be in a very different position. I have a lot. So,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
noticed a couple of things with myself. I was a couple years ago, I was driving, had the top down in the convertible, and I just caught myself. Like I saw myself in the rearview mirror for the first time. Like I see myself in mirrors all the time, but I was like looking, like I was, oh, who is that guy? Oh, that's me. And I thought, holy shit, I'm old. You have this gray beard and it really hit me. And then I just burst out laughing because the thought that popped into my head next was, well, it sure beats the alternative.
yeah, can
Right.
you
And
stand?
that's what it is. And then I noticed too, like I fell in love with Taos, New Mexico in the last couple of years. And I realized one of the big reasons, of course, the nature is a big part of it for me, but there's another big part. Like when I'm out and about in Taos, the old people sparkle, right? And they got wrinkles and they got scars and they got sags and they sparkle. Like I was skiing off this, I hiked up to this, cornice on the ridge and then dropped in. And then I had lost both of my skis. The powder was so deep, and I'm by myself. You're not supposed to ski up there by yourself, but I was by myself. It's the end of the day. And I'm hunting around for my skis with the ski pole. And I was pretty proud of myself because I was doing this really great skiing. And here comes this woman, 75 years old, from above me. You okay? Again, sparkle, silver hair, wrinkles like crazy, eyes bright, are you okay? I said, yes, I'd lost both my skis. She goes, yeah, I was watching you when you jumped off the cornice. You didn't knock the snow off your boots well enough. So you get a little bit of snow in between there, and then your skis will pop off when you get in the deep powder. But you're sure you're okay? Yeah. Okay. So next time, just pay attention to that. And she disappears. And here I think, hey, I'm a 50 something guy and I'm badass going up on the ridge. And there's a 75-year-old woman kicking my ass. And there's something so beautiful about that. And to let ourselves be, but also to be fully. And that's something like I think I'm more fit and more healthy overall than I've ever been in my life. And it's not, and now am I also older? Absolutely. Does it, do more things hurt? Absolutely. Is it harder to sleep? Absolutely.
Mm.
Does it take more energy to be fit and healthy? Absolutely. And yet it's a gift each day too. And I'm starting to see that. And that also makes a big difference, right? That every day it's not a given. I have friends that are dropping now at my age.
Mm.
Right. And so I try to remember that and think each time I'm doing something fun that this may be the last time I get to do it. If I'm out on my road bike or if I'm skiing or, giving my daughter a shoulder rub, this may be the last time. And I really try to be present with that. And that it's not sobering in a dark way. It brings awareness and presence to the moments that I have. And I can say from my experience, I'm not as far into the 50s as you are, but my life is better than it's ever been. It's still not perfect. I still have my ups and downs. Like I said, last week was a struggle, but it's better than it's ever been
Mm.
with the awareness that I bring, even if my body is getting older, which it undeniably is.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
mean, it is what it is. I mean, and I just don't, I can understand how people could start to focus on how the external, I understand how that could be a real distraction. Yet that's why I think it's so important that we more so than ever focus, like, I gotta do both. Like, yes, I wanna focus on the external, but if I'm not satisfied internally, I don't care what my external life looks like. Like, I don't, I every then people micro focus. Nothing is perfect. Like, no matter what you do, it will never look the way you want it to look. So, I'm all about an advocate of health. Yes, I wanna have longevity, I wanna have vitality, I don't wanna look my age, who does when you get older, but what am I gonna do? Um, but I think the internal conversation becomes even more important, right?
Yeah. I
And, like,
love what Eckhart Tolle says. He says, make friends with the present moment and see how your life magically transforms. Right.
I
So
mean,
be friends. Yeah. I've got a lot of wrinkles. I've got a lot of scars. I do. My right shoulder doesn't move like it used to after I broke it a few years ago, and it's never going to. Guess what? I still did a full Ironman after that. So does it really matter? No. I mean, I could focus on it and do a bunch of physical therapy and try to get it there. No, it's good enough. I'm really surprised that I've learned in the last few years good enough.
Yeah.
Right.
And I want to, I do want to be an example to other women. I want them to understand that you can age gracefully. The angst that women go through now and what they think they need to do to themselves to fit in, it pains me when I look at them and I'm like, God, you're beautiful. Like, you know what I mean? Like if I would have, like my 20-year-old, my 30-year-old, my 40-year-old, when I look back at her now, I'm like, man, you look good. Like what the hell was I so upset about? Like,
Right.
and I look at these women, they don't see themselves. We don't see ourselves for who we are. We do not see ourselves. That's just a weird
So how can we change
biological.
that, Anisa? Like from the perspective you have, and you're in the beauty industry, and now
Yeah.
you've been a beautiful young lady. Now you're a beautiful middle-aged lady, but not trying to be a beautiful young lady anymore.
Yeah.
How can we change that? Because I also feel like I'm so glad in a sense from that perspective that I'm not a woman, because the pressure seems crazy. Like, you know, to go get plastic surgery and to go do this and to go do that, to try to cling to something that we're no longer that something, and yet we're clinging to it. But the pressure seems really high. What would you say to your younger self? What would you say to other women to let it be okay?
That's a thing. It's individual. I mean, that's what I think is the struggle. There can be an echo chamber, which there is, echo chambers about what you need to do, and people can get caught up in that. Um, However, it's an individual journey. I cannot change how another woman thinks or feels about herself. I can only maybe be an example, and if they were to ask me, I could then share my experience, but they have to make their own choices. We all have to make our own choices. I mean,
So maybe it
that's
comes
all.
back to what you said earlier, that it's taking care of yourself, whatever that means for you, but to get clear on that, to have the self-awareness, and then to take care of yourself first, whatever that is.
I think people just got to get honest where their angst is. I think it's really hard to understand where our insecurities, our patterns for survival are. And if we can look at those, okay, how am I acting? That is a survival thing. Envy, jealousy, discomfort, whatever those attributes we would deem to be negative that I'm living my life by. Like I'm doing this to my face because of the following, because I think it looks good, because I think I have to, because I'm trying to do this. Like, what is the motivations? And if people could get honest about that, then I think then you're halfway there. But that self-reflection and honesty is not easy.
Mm, mm,
Right?
yeah.
It's not. It's we are so it's so easy to mask because of whatever what we think we're feeling or what we think
Yes.
we're doing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, that's a big
It's easy.
challenge. And to recognize the motivations for why we're doing the things that we're
And
doing is maybe
time.
the most
Like,
important.
to me, how do you get time to go think? How do you get time to be like, okay, I just need 24 hours to understand why am I doing this?
Right.
Where do we get that time to like,
Do you have a practice for that where you build in breaks? Do you have a time of creating space in your life? And what does that look like?
I think it did start with the meditations in the morning.
Hmm.
I think that's where the neural pathway, you know, development and the time between thoughts where I could be like, oh, wait a minute, let me insert myself into that thought. Is that a real thought? Is that me thinking that? Is that a pattern? Is that from my parents? Is that from society? Is that me? And I think the meditation is what gave me the ability to start a real journey of development.
Mm. And do you have any, like, I think of time and space and energy and effort. I think of it all in fractals now, right? So meditation is the daily fractal of time. Do you have other fractals that you practice, longer or shorter, to create space, to have reflection?
I have really, I guess, again, turning 50, where I started to enjoy my own time more than ever.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, when I travel, when I leave Atlanta and I travel, that's when, my mind opens up differently. um, doing these different kinds of seminars or things, the readings that I'm doing, Saturdays or Sundays are my time where I don't have to entertain or go or do. I can be with myself and really enjoy it. So I think whether it's through art or journaling, travel, those are my reflective moments. I also give myself credit now. It used to be that, okay, I'm having this thought, I got to do something about it. Now it's now it's like I'm having a thought. Okay, this is interesting. Let's write it down and we'll look at it in 2 weeks. And if it still matters, we will, deal with it. So
Right.
it's more like also having a bit of patience with myself. I used to be so, got to do it now. And I don't know what that was about. And so anxiety, mania, maybe it was the heavy metals in my brain that I've detoxed out. Maybe,
Right.
who knows what it was. But now it's like,
Right.
give myself a minute to process things and understand what's real and what's not.
Mm,
What matters now, what really, really matters now.
mm,
And that takes time to assess,
mm.
right?
Yeah. I love that. And if we make decisions before we really understand what matters now, then we could be working very hard and very frantically and very stressfully on something that it simply doesn't matter. It's not taking us in the direction that we want to go.
I also believe that we are energetic beings. And so if we start to change our insides, we don't have to physically maybe manifest like we have to go do it. Maybe it will manifest, right?
Yeah. Maybe
So,
it can happen because of our allowing instead of our resisting, right? Or our forcing.
and I do think if we start to evolve, things around us will evolve because we're natural, energetic beings. We're going to attract how we evolve. So I've been working on that, the
Yeah.
last year and seeing that that kind of does happen.
So it keeps coming back to healing, growing, solving ourselves first,
Yeah.
giving ourselves
Yes.
a space, giving ourselves a peace. Now that's resonates with me for sure. If you could give one tool for managing transition, especially these difficult, deep, dark transitions, let's say that we talked about here today, if you could give one tool, one action, one applicable piece of wisdom that someone can take right now, listen to this podcast and hit the pause button and say, "This, I'm going to apply this in my life." One thing, what would that
Hmm.
be?
Well, this is easier to say than to do. Um, but what I think the greatest gift we can for anything that we're going to go through, good and bad, right? Because we don't know even when good things happen, they might be challenging. That hand over heart. Like this is what I learned recently. That it's just like take a minute, put your hand over your heart, and give yourself a little bit of grace and compassion, and pull that energy back to you. And it's really about, can I just love myself through this, because I think that's the hardest thing for all of us on some level is like, I love myself,
Hmm. Hmm.
I need to love myself.
Hmm.
That is something from now until the day I die. I hope that I have that focus.
Hmm. So
And
the
this,
number one thing would be to love yourself, and the one practice is in any moment, whatever comes up, is to physically put a hand on the heart and feel that, and whatever it is, I love myself, or it's going to be all right, buddy, or whatever it is, right? To bring some compassion, some self-love and self-compassion into that very moment, whatever is going on.
yeah, and if you feel like it feels stupid, okay, feel stupid. Like for me right now, I feel like I want to cry. Like I feel, and feeling like I want to cry makes me feel weak, So,
Right?
and, all the like, but I feel so like, God, like, why did it take this long? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's, what I mean? It took so long for me to get to this place. Um, but, that is what it is. But yeah, that's what right now, if anybody was open to it, it does work.
Mm.
And just deal with whatever you feel like. I feel stupid. I feel dumb. This is not real. I
Let it
don't,
go. Let the feelings keep going. Just let them be. And
and
it's
just,
interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
I mentioned last week where I was having this tough week, and on after my prayer and meditation time on Friday morning, which Friday was the Thursday night, Friday morning was the tipping point to where I had a great Easter weekend. Part of it was I got this real clear direction: love yourself. And I've I don't know if you've read this book. I have it right here, but it's Revenant. He wrote a book called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It, because it does. And that was just his experience to come back from suicide back into life. And he just wrote down what he did. And one of the things, there's lots of things, but the one that stuck with me that I did on Friday morning was to look in the mirror really close, so you can't see anything but yourself, like maybe a few inches away, and set a timer out of view for 5 minutes and just say, I love myself, or I love you, Art, or I love myself, for 5 minutes, looking yourself in the eye. And what triggered me thinking about that is it always comes up for me, sadness or goofy happiness. Like, I don't know why, but that's when I know I really connected. And that I did that on Friday morning. And there was a couple years ago, I did that every day for, I don't know how many weeks or months.
A long time.
And it's a long time, but
A long time, 5 minutes.
But talk about getting into yourself and being self-aware. It's really, it is a long time to love yourself and look in the mirror. And it's a very short time of the day. Yeah. So there's not a lot to give, but I think that's beautiful advice.
I mean, it's
beautiful advice.
Very sweet. Like, I haven't done that kind of stuff. Like, I would love to start doing some of that. That's interesting, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Pick up his book. Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. It's a simple little book, but it's worthwhile. Well, thank you, Anisa, so much. One last question. If people want to find out more about you, where can they do that?
I have an IG, The Real ATK. I have my LinkedIn, which is Anisa Telwork Haker. And I do my best to be engaged on social, but not as much as I would like. I think I'm working on, if I want to do more of that, sharing what the journey is, the struggle is, but I'm very open, to sharing, what I have been through, and also to support people on this journey.
Wonderful. And does your business have a website too, if they wanted to check out your business?
Yeah, we have Anisa.com and we have AnisaBeauty.com. So I have a new D2C site where we sell what we do, which I'm very proud of. And then we have Anisa.com, which is our private label manufacturing.
Okay. Very good. Anything else you would like to add today?
No, just thanks, Art. Thanks for this. It just feels good to always talk about, emotions, talk about the heart, talk about we're these holistic beings, and that I'm just, honored that we get to connect this way. So I appreciate you.
Well, thank you for coming on. It's my greatest pleasure right now in my life to reconnect with friends in this way and make new friends as well. So really, thank you, Anisa. Really appreciate it. All the best.
Thank you, Art.
I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.